Such men may be shaking or crying, but more often they are just very tired and dirty and depressed. They are unnerved and have no initiative. They're not quitters, but are truly ill.
Tell me, soldier, what's your trouble?
I can't stand seeing people killed.
What were you afraid of?
Everything.
What in particular? What in particular?
Dead.
What?
Dead.
Dead what?
Dead people. Can't stand seeing them.
I can't hear you.
Can't stand seeing dead people.
People who were not necessarily severely wounded, but who were no longer in charge of themselves. They would put them in a detachment or an installation to put them through a kind of a very quick and dirty process in which they were given sodium amytal or one of these other, it's a sort of a truth serum thing, but it was in the form of tablets. And this would give them a very deep, deep sleep, sort of almost a trance-like sleep, for 24, sometimes 48 hours. During this time, the enlisted men and myself would sometimes go by. We had to supervise it because they'd be screaming and they would be deep, deep asleep, and there'd be terrible expressions of their fear and their fright.
You're back on the battlefield now.
Watch out, those shells are coming. Watch out! Duck!
The assumptions were that this would have some kind of cathartic effect, the sodium amytal, which the men called blue 88s. You know, the most effective artillery piece of the Germans was the 88, and this was blue 88s because the sodium amytal was a blue tablet. And then they would come out of this, and depending on the dosage, 24, 48, 72 hours, and they'd be walking around completely numb. Sometimes they would be slipping and falling. That took a few more hours. And then they would be given a shower, new clothes, and a pep talk, and the attempt was made to send them back. I say the attempt because it didn't always succeed. They weren't suitable to be returned. And in a sense, the thing that repelled me so badly was that you were talking to men who weren't quite yet still in charge of themselves, and you were sort of shepherding them back to the front. At one time, the chief of staff asked me to go out and talk to them. He said, "You're good at that, you go out and talk." And I said, "Colonel, I really don't want to do it." He said, "I know, Ben." He said, "Do it anyhow." And I went out and I tried haphazardly to try to get them, to persuade them to get in their trucks and go back. They'd finished with their 72 hours, they'd gotten their clothes, and they just looked at me, and half of them looked as if they couldn't focus. And finally one of them said, "Don't you guys understand? If you can still walk and see, they'll keep shipping you back." So I didn't do that again. And I told my commanding officer,
In the last few days of January, American troops made their way back to the original lines, the ones they'd held before the German offensive began. The books on the Battle of the Bulge were closed. 16,000 Americans had been killed. 60,000 more wounded or captured. German casualties were said to be twice that. There was no ceremony to mark the end of the battle, not even a headline. The GIs simply kept moving forward into Germany.
The Battle of the Bulge would be remembered as the great surprise of the campaign in Europe. I think General Bradley would hold that it speeded the end of the war because the German took so many casualties, and when he was as severely defeated as he was in the Battle of the Bulge, it helped end the thing by May. An intelligence failure, certainly we didn't know he was coming. When you look back on the record now, you can say, hey, you should have seen this, or you should have seen that, or anticipated this. I don't think anyone did.
Quand nous avons commencé à arriver dans les Ardennes,
when we started to make our way back into the Ardennes, it was something quite amazing. Emerging from the snow, the white, were two things. Houses that were destroyed, because the villages were practically all destroyed, and huge black holes, vast numbers of them, in the fields.
C'était un paysage d'apocalypse, c'était vraiment...
It was an apocalyptic landscape. Really, a madman wouldn't have been able to imagine such a landscape.
Par exemple, on avait enterré les gens, mais très sommairement.
People had been buried, but very summarily, because in winter, everything was frozen.
Ça nous faisait peur. Et nos parents, bien sûr, tâchaient de nous retenir de ces lieux-là, mais...
It was frightening. And our parents, of course, tried to keep us from those places. Still, they were everywhere, these bodies, half buried.
Après 2 ou 3 ans, on a fini par quand même...
It was 2 or 3 years before they managed to find the bodies of all the soldiers that had fallen.
Every time it snows or something, I'll think about those days during the Bulge. It brings back memories of the friends that I lost and the desperate feeling that we had in those days. And it kind of irks me that after 50 years, I still think that way. I should forget it and go on about my life, but I guess it made such an impression, it'll always be with me, I guess.
These memories are there a lot more vividly, even after 50 years, than probably what I did yesterday. I can tell you how deep the snow was. I can tell you the color of the snow and the blood the next morning. I know what equipment I had on. I know the words we said. They stay with you.
It doesn't go away. It sleeps sometimes, but then it awakens again. Things are happening, people are doing things that you never dreamed you'd ever see or hear about. It's an enormity of an experience. And everything after that has been a footnote.
There's more about the Battle of the Bulge at American Experience Online. Browse an interactive timeline of the war and read personal stories from soldiers and nurses who were there. All this and more at PBS Online, pbs.org, America Online keyword PBS. Battle of the Bulge is available for $19.95 plus shipping and handling from WGBH Boston Video. To place an order, call 1-800-255-9424.
I don't think any man can exactly explain combat. It's beyond words.
I don't really want to get to know anybody over here because it would be bad enough to lose a man. I damn sure don't want to lose a friend.
I love you so and miss you so.
From the Revolution to the Gulf War, these are their words. War letters. Next time on American Experience.
process in which they were given sodium amytal, or one of these other, it's a sort of a truth serum thing, but it was in the form of tablets. And this would give them a very deep, deep sleep, sort of almost a trance-like sleep, for 24, sometimes 48 hours. During this time, the enlisted men and myself would sometimes go by. We had to supervise it because they'd be screaming and they would be deep, deep asleep, and there'd be terrible expressions of their fear and their fright.
You're back on the battlefield now.
Watch out, those shells are coming. Watch out! Duck!
The assumptions were that this would have some kind of cathartic effect, the sodium amytal, which the men called blue 88s. You know, the most effective artillery piece of the Germans was the...
Such men may be shaking or crying, but more often they are just very tired and dirty and depressed. They are unnerved and have no initiative. They're not quitters, but are truly ill.
Tell me, soldier, what's your trouble?
I can't stand seeing people killed.
What were you afraid of?
Everything.
What in particular? What in particular?
Dead.
What?
Dead.
Dead what?
Dead people. Can't stand seeing them.
I can't hear you.
Can't stand seeing dead people.
People who were not necessarily severely wounded, but who were no longer in charge of themselves. They would put them in a detachment or an installation to put them through a kind of a very quick and dirty